Morning, Deirdre.
Good morning, Tom. How are you today?
I'm great. Nice sunny, windy day.
Lovely day there. That's the Spanish coast, isn't it?
I was hoping you were going to say Portugal.
Well, the flag is a giveaway, I
Oh,
think.
yes. Good point.
And and
Excellent
and
point.
the Castillo there looks very Spanish,
And I
but
don't know
that
how you get all this stuff. You're right. This is in Catalonia or Catalonia.
yes.
It's north of Barcelona and it's called Tossa de Mar.
Mhm.
I probably butchered that because I don't speak Spanish.
A
And I
lovely
butchered it
place,
with a German accent, I think.
right?
But beautiful place.
A great place for you to be hanging out.
Yeah, yes, it is. It certainly is. What are we talking about today?
We are talking about the human-machine partnership,
Why are
and
we talking about that
because we didn't get to talk about it in our last
yesterday?
episode.
Yes,
Those of
exactly.
you who have listened to our last episode know.
No, but that's I'm some way I'm joking, but in a serious way though, Deirdre, why are we focusing so much? I mean, you and I, our whole point behind deep business is to evaluate the marketplace and say what's going on in the marketplace and try to help evaluate that from an opportunity and a risk point of view for people that are trying to build businesses and to say how what thoughts might we have in trying to simplify it down to a set of concepts to look at and say what could you do to deal with this if there's an opportunity there or a risk there. So why are we focusing so much, because we've done pretty consistently, I think 6 7 now, on AI. Why are we doing that?
Because we deal in reality, Tom, and the way that people can get the value that they want out of these AI models, both LLMs and the reasoning models, is to form a human machine partnership. The tech companies may have you believing that, oh, all you have to do is press a button and out comes this output that creates your strategic plan for the next 10 years. You and I know that it doesn't happen like that. In fact, we did videos 62 through 67 covering exactly what has to happen to get output that even just forms the first draft of work that a leader is going to want to do. And why we're talking about the human and machine partnership in more depth now in this conversation is to make it absolutely clear what the two sides contribute and then how the human has to lead the whole process, stay ahead of the machine, direct the machine, decide what the problem is going to be, the problem being solved will be, set the prompt logic, and then work with the output to get the results you want. So, as I say, this is something of a reality check. We've shown people in videos 62 through 67 how this works, how you have worked with these models. But now what we're trying to do is move into, okay, leader, this is how you can start to think about doing it. There's another aspect here, and this is a very important one, and it's a point we've started to make, Tom, and that is using these models doesn't just improve productivity, which is what the tech companies talk about. It changes the substance of work. It
Yeah.
changes how the work gets done. And one of the points we're making, and I hope we can demonstrate it in this presentation, or if not in this video, in subsequent videos, is that the direction for the machine, for the AI model, has to come from the top. If you're going to get the results you want, that is that the leader has to be driving this process because the process depends on the mindset, the knowledge, the intuition of a leader. You know, you know the way it happens in corporations. A leader may turn to a team of bright young new MBAs and say, okay, pull together this report. But these younger employees, however bright, however high the school they got their MBA from, are new to the marketplace, new to the industry, new to business generally, new to the organization. So the best that they can do is come up with some template for creating something. And of course, we know that these models work to templates as well. That's how they're programmed. They're programmed on a whole bunch of data to accomplish certain tasks. But business is more than just tasks. And that's a fact that the tech companies need to learn also, that business leadership is more than just tasks. It's this whole body of skills. So the best that these bright new MBAs can come out with is the first draft from the machine. And then someone with the mindset, the knowledge, the instincts, the handiness in the field, the industry, the marketplace, then can take that and then create what is useful for the company. Means that the whole substance of work changes. You can't expect to get great substance out of your new MBAs until you train them. You yourself, if you want the great substance, have to pick up and do a lot of the work. So this adjusts processes, it adjusts personnel, it adjusts how you spend your own time as the leader of an organization. And I know you have a lot of thoughts on this, Tom, so I'll stop here and let you
Oh,
jump.
okay. So yeah, if we take a moment and even step higher because of the preamble you've given here, what we are doing is looking at this marketplace around the world and saying, where are the big opportunities and risks? And we've zeroed in here on AI because what we're starting to see with the reasoning models is the ability to make real today, not play, not create a meme, not create a great um, uh, drawing or architectural substance or something like that. We're seeing real productivity coming out of this that can border on elements of creativity if it's directed properly by people that have, as you just said, knowledge and skill and judgment, that you can actually get some creative results out of these things that you've never been able to get before. That's not easy to do. Can they do it? They can. We've seen it. We've seen it. I just gave you an example a few minutes ago where it did an excellent piece of creative work for me yesterday, and that was Claude with a lot of prompting and a lot of narrowing down, right? I told you, look, I had to get a lot to the very end before I could open it back up and come then to something. So this is not what you and I would call, it's not undirected work, right? It's not following the model. You're leading the model. And what we're saying about this, and the reason we're spending so much time on this, and we keep in ways repeating, but trying to morph it in different ways to get people to understand the depth of what's here, because you and I, after what we've seen in the last 9 months now, in terms of delivering results, we believe, and with the opportunity to deliver results is probably a better thing to say, that we believe that serious people need to understand what's going on here because we believe this is going to change the substance of what people do, how they function in every aspect of life at some point, pretty much every aspect of life. And as a result, are going to be with us for a long time and have a big effect on the marketplace and change and make a big effect on how people build a business and how they function in that process of building. And as a result of that, that's why we're spending time now, because we think the earlier you understand it and the better you understand it, the more that you'll be able to take advantage of it in the marketplace. And we think that a good leader of any organization, if they just get their head around this, they'll do a couple of things. They'll gain productivity on or gain benefit, productive results in their organizations and in the marketplace and in the competitive environment. Secondly, they'll make sure they're not falling behind because somebody is going to do this, right? This is the point you and I make. If we're sitting here and we're doing it, then somebody else is going to be able to do it. And they will do it and they will begin to leapfrog you. And that's so there's an offensive and a defensive. And we believe it's all the way down from building a business as it applies to business, right? We realize this may not apply exactly the same in science and or the humanities, but in building businesses, um, we believe it goes not just starting at um, building a business, but even how you learn in a process, how you teach, and also even how you mentor, and finally, how you even parent someone in learning, right? And so we believe all of those demand could benefit from now understanding this issue in depth because there's so much opportunity here. Now, we both know that business is about both, or life is about opportunity and risk, right? It's about that balance of opportunity and risk.
Right.
And we know that building businesses has a lot of opportunity and risk in it. And we just see this, and having done this for, a very long time, and you combine your experience and mine together, um, we're seeing this is a major factor going forward. And that's why we're spending the time on it. Now, also, there's another reason, and that's because there's a lot of change going on in the marketplace, and it's hard to evaluate all that other change. Now, we are going to do another program here soon, episode, where we'll say, okay, let's go through and kind of lay the land on what we're seeing in the marketplace
Right.
and how that why we may not be ready to make a judgment on this yet, on what kind of opportunity or risk does it provide. Um, so we're not ignoring that. We're just deciding it's not, when we look at the list of things, and we were just laying out a list, it still does, none of those rise to this level of importance in long-term thinking. I've just said a lot, dear. Again, you're very kind to then sit here and yep, 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 and think you're getting ready to go. So
But you're right here, Tom. This is the way that business is going to go. Um, but I think actually maybe what we do is we dive down into how do you form a human machine partnership? Let's make this really concrete at this point. So you have the machine part of the partnership. It's an AI model. It's been trained by, and we've heard about this training, scraping data and feeding it to algorithms so that the model can generate certain results. Now, understand one, that this is not necessarily updated all the time. So with all of the change in the marketplace, these models may be a bit behind here. This is part of the human aspect, which we'll get to further. But it's also that it's been trained generally. It hasn't been trained for the specifics. And the more any business leader knows that the more specific you get with the definition of the problem, the easier it is to come up with a definition and with a decision that make the problem that work in the marketplace for the organization. But let's start with these machines. What do? They do search. In fact, we know from our Sunday workshop, what we reported in the last video, most people using these models are simply using them for search. And some of the models have the capability to do really deep search. In fact, you've demonstrated this on some of the videos we've done in the past, but it's still search. Beyond that, these models can organize the search results to some degree, to varying degrees, depending on the model. Then they can, if prompted, and remember, every time we use the word prompt here, that means a human is taking some action to get the machine to do something here. If prompted, they can create a synthesis of various results, which is simply what I said, a synthesis of the results uncovered in the search, which may or may not be valid in terms of the problem being solved. They can also create a first draft of something. They can write something. And sometimes these first drafts are astonishingly seductive. They look
yes,
as if there's something that I hear students are turning them in for as university papers and so forth. But you and I are also seeing, Tom, in the media, how do you tell articles? How do you tell if this was generated by AI? Here are a list of the words that AI uses that no human uses, and so forth. It is so simple for anyone paying attention to figure out that something was generated by an AI model and not by a human. And some of it is simply because of the programming, the words they've been programmed to use, the structures they've been programmed to use, and so forth. The other aspect of it is something I've already mentioned, but we're going to get into in a lot of depth right now. And that is the knowledge, judgment, instincts, and mindset that the human brings to the machine in creating a product in business. So again, the machine part of this is the capabilities to search, to organize, to synthesize, and to write a first draft, which can be a tremendous amount of work. And this is where a lot of the productivity comes in. I don't mean to indicate that there isn't value here. There's tremendous value here as long as you understand what you are getting. And that's the key point here, as long as you understand what you are getting. Now let's start to talk about the human part here. Everything that the machine does is as a result of a prompt by a human. And we know that people mess around with these models and they say, hey, Claude, go out and do this. That's a very casual prompt. You know, if a business leader wanting to get certain output from which to develop something in business actually stops at the beginning before giving any prompts and thinks through what prompts would be valuable, what's the logical sequence of prompts, because these machines work in a logical sequence. And if you get the logic wrong, your answer is going to be completely different. Which is interesting. We've experimented with this and we've shown this sometimes. And then the leader takes the thinking and the logic and has to write it out in ways that are comprehensible to the machine. These are the fundamental skills that any leader brings even before some of the other aspects we've been talking about. So you have a leader who knows how to think, create a logical sequence, and then communicate that logical sequence to the machine, who will then work on this. But this human who is doing this thinking and creating the logical sequence isn't someone who's just created out of nowhere. This is someone in a leadership position who has developed a mindset over the years. And you and I have defined this mindset as it's based on the knowledge and judgment that comes from monitoring the marketplace and customers, competitors, thinking about the industry and emerging technologies and business and social factors in terms of the capabilities of the organization. So that's a basic frame of mind that a leader has. And on top of that, the leader has in-depth industry knowledge, marketplace knowledge, product information, and organizational information that form likely this, or that relate, oh, that's a better way to put it, relate likely to the problem the leader wants to work on with this machine. I want to develop a strategy for this new product initiative, or I want to see if this marketplace segment will work for my products. Things like that, but you have to have and have internalized a lot of knowledge about a broad range of topics. Again, about the organization, the industry, the marketplace, competitors, customers, products, emerging technologies that could wipe out your industry. We've seen this happen multiple times over the past decade and so forth. So that someone is coming to the thinking and the logical sequence as a deeply informed, thoughtful person with a lot of knowledge and a lot of judgment, and having the practice of making decisions in the field. And on that basis, then this person can set out the prompts that start the process with the machine. So the person prompts the machine, and you've shown how you do this in our videos 62 through 67, Tom. And then you start to get output. You get at best the first draft. And this takes actually this whole sequence of prompts and revising the prompts and thinking through how to change the prompts and how to move the machine in a different direction and so forth. This can be a very time-consuming process here. I mean, it's taken you a week to do certain of these sequences, and certainly can take a lot more for people dealing with certain issues like developing a new strategic plan. Then the output at most is the first draft. And that's when the human comes back in and takes over the whole process. The machine part itself cannot go further without the human doing a lot of work. And this is where the human comes back to the output with the mindset, the judgments, the knowledge, the instincts, and able to work with this output to move in a certain direction. Now, it's entirely possible, and I think you've shown in one of our videos how you did this, that then the human, after doing a lot of work on this first draft, comes back to the machine and asks for further input. But it's very much a human-driven process here. Now, I've been talking for a while, and it's time for me to toss it back to you.
When one of the concepts here is the priorities that are built into the model. And when we're talking about the models here, we're not talking about a scientific model structured that's been built. We're talking about a broad-based LLM, like ChatGPT or Genesis or Grok or Claude or all the others here that are all different to some degree, but they have various elements and various priorities. An interesting example is recent issues with Grok. And Deirdre, it centers around this point you brought up just a minute ago when you started, which was the issue of how current is the information? And then what does that do to the model, right? So this is where you're taking somebody that knows this technology, probably from a practical point of view, is in that very small group of people that knows this stuff as well as anybody. From a practical point of view, Elon Musk, he built Grok to make sure it had the least bias in it. Okay, that it was as truthful as possible was his definition, which meant he had to do a lot of of cleaning training data, right? Scouring and cleaning training data to provide the truth. Now, we all can wonder if the truth in however they were doing that was biased, right? But regardless, just assume that you know what you have defined as the truth or whatever you're seeking to aim at. But then the problem became the one you alluded to, is if you do that, you take an enormous amount of time and you put yourself a little bit at the currency, down on the currency scale, because it's not as current because you had to take all that time. And he was being pressed competitively to say, look, we can't take a database that's 9 months old. It has to be more current than 9 months old when I want to ask a question about what's going on. And so then he moved it to a more current, to its moment at the moment. Well, that means you're infusing it with data that you haven't been able to scrub necessarily as well. And it became moving toward where the bulk of the data was, which in his mind created an element of bias because then there were certain voices in the data that were louder than others. And what the people that were using it to describe this were not doing is they were not using a capability, in my mind, called explainability, which is where you ask for the deep search so that you can see exactly where was this information coming from, and was there an element in your mind of an infused bias in the answer you just got. We came up with a concept, and Deirdre, I don't know how long ago we did this because we've been looking at AI as like we're looking at quantum computing now, right? We came up with a concept called SEB, S-E-B. Tell you how old this was. I named it after Sebastian Vettel, who was winning the world championships in a sequential form back in Formula One days. And gosh knows how many years that's been. He hasn't driven in Formula One for years. So that
Right,
shows you how long we've been dealing with AI.
right.
But it was about the three big elements of artificial intelligence. The first was safety, S. The second was explainability, E, and last was bias, B, SCB, safety, explainability, bias. Safety meaning at the basic level, is your data safe? Is the result you're getting safe? Or is it going to be like our friend, the musician, said, no, it sucks up my creativity and puts it in the training, and then people are repeating my song back in a variation, right? If it's out there for a few weeks. And in his mind, that has to be solved. Then the explainability is, where did it come from? So explain to me how you got it. This was the original failure of IBM's, Deep Blue that was implemented years and years ago. I think I was even at IBM then, when it was being developed to aid physicians in medicine. But what it couldn't do at that time was do explainability. So it came out with what we found out later were really good answers for the physicians. They wouldn't use it because they couldn't see explainability. I just simplified a very simple concept, and it's open to plenty of people coming in saying, wait a minute, you oversimplified that. But essentially that was the issue, is that with lack of explainability, a doctor's just not going to say, you say it's high blood pressure, prove it to me. How did you conclude that? Just like they would if they were using somebody they're training for something. To, okay, tell me what your conclusion is and tell me how you reached it. Explainability is a big deal. Some of these models are doing a really good job of explainability these days. But it's important that you know that. So not only do you have to worry about the safety, which is my data going to be used, but you also need to worry about the safety of the model. Is the priority in the way I want it to be? Meaning, is it, instead of closing the dams off, is it going to open the dams for me at a certain thing? Instead of closing them, did I get that right? Right? Or is there too much flexibility in there to allow it to conclude something it shouldn't? And the last one's bias. Is there a trend in the data that shades it in a certain direction that is not consistent with your judgment of where it should go? And this is the point that you have been making about the responsibility of the human. It's the responsibility of the human to make sure that those three things are covered, that you have safety in the data, meaning safety in not only the data itself that you're putting in there, but the result that's coming out, and you're protecting all the things you want to be protecting. And with that is the safety of the model itself and the priorities of the model. That's why you and I spend so much time deciding what models are we going to use, and why there's one we won't even install on our machines, right? Or allow it to function. Not because of things we know about it, it's the things we don't know about it that we believe could be true that we don't have solid information on. Then it's, how well do you force explainability, like you would for a doctor, just saying, okay, tell me what you see and tell me why you see it, why you conclude that. And then lastly, looking for, it's heading in a direction I don't think is the right direction. And then testing why you think it's not, and have you proven it's not? That's the role of the human in here. And the role of the human, and I think if you wanted to get by this and say, is there a cheat code to deal with this? I think the cheat code to deal with this is treat it like a human. Treat it like, as you and I have said, it's a very smart graduate student who's has more capability and maybe is a good bit smarter than you are, and has way more speed. Their clock speed of functioning is way above yours, and has the ability to access stuff at a speed and a breadth that you can't even get your hands around. And it's like a 90-year-old Warren Buffett. But what makes Warren Buffett still effective at 90 years old? It's not the fact that he can do that stuff. It's the fact that he can stare, and there are plenty of different kinds of Warren Buffetts around. I'm just using him as an example. It's his experience and judgment and decision making. That's what matters with a Warren Buffett. It's that knowledge, experience, judgment, decision making that he has about his area of expertise that very few have had. And it's bringing that to bear on the people that and the influence he's providing. I think if you think of yourself in a similar way, you're 90 years old, you're not going to fly around the world every single time you want to and be able to research in the library for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, like your model can do. And I think if you treat it that way and you say, here's what I'd like, give me your first shot at this thing, let's take a look at it. And you give it the parameters you would if somebody came in your office or came in a video call and you said, here, I'd like you to take a look at this for me and come back and tell me what you think. You can learn a lot about the model because you can learn about what is inherent in the way they function. And then secondly, you can begin to see explainability. You can begin to see because if you're questioning and redirecting the model. So we think it's an iterative process. And if you really need an algorithm or a cheat code, our advice is treat it like a human that works for you. And that's why we've said this a number of times. I actually treat it that way. I say, good morning. I could use your help on this. I know it seems nuts, and people like Altman would tell me I'm chewing up compute time, but I'm saying, no, it's not about you. And I don't care about your compute time. I'm paying for that these days. It's about how do I want to think in my own mind? How do I want to be thinking about this to function properly and do my job as the human side of this in this partnership? And this gets back to the fundamental, and Deirdre, I promise I'll stop here.
No,
This
no,
gets
no.
back to you being very patient, right? No, but and I'm not strongly convicted on this subject. But but the point is though that you have an incredibly capable thing here. And this is what we believe. This is why we're spending so much time on it, because there's so much opportunity here. How can we expose that to you and give you a couple of cheat codes in dealing with it? Just treat it that way. Treat it like that very smart, more capable human being that lacks your judgment, your experience, and your ability to see what it can't see. I'll stop at this that I described to you this morning something I did yesterday that boy, it took, what did I tell you? It took 2 hours. I know how to work this stuff. And I'm using with a really good model, Claude, and I'm using the most advanced version. It's really easy to use. It's very good for what I was doing. And it only got there after I directed it for 2 hours getting through it. Now, a lot of that was me reviewing the output, trying to figure out where did I see? But then I told you at the end, it gave me some really interesting thoughts. Now, what I did tell you was it gave me a list of things, and I only picked some of them to do, right? Because others had some impracticality. I thought they may head in a slightly wrong direction. Why? Because I wasn't really sure that I actually got the priority right for it, the way it saw it, the way I thought I wrote it properly for prompting, but it didn't come back at me that way, which means I didn't really prompt it all that well. So there's something about the way I'm writing, which I thought was clear and logical. I'd spent a lot of time on the prompt, but it didn't interpret it that way, at least to me, which is I'm missing something, just like a human. I'm using words and I'm using it in a way, and it's like any communication, right? It's not about what I want to do, it's about how they're mirroring back what I want done, right? I promise I'll stop because I know you have really good thoughts on this, so probably better than I would continue.
Tom, we have so much to say about this, that might as well just talk when we can. What you're really talking about, what you've really demonstrated here, Tom, is the importance of the human in this human machine partnership. Because not only do you have to start by understanding your tool, your machine, your model, but you also have to understand how it's been programmed so you know how to interpret what it is doing here. This is even more work for the human beyond what I was talking about previously. You and I have talked in previous videos about how the various models have different capabilities. They've been programmed to do different things. We also are starting to look askance at some of what's happening right now, where some of the programming of these models is removing some of the guardrails or
Mhm.
changing some of the basic underlying rules.
And just define guardrails for a second, Deirdre, so people understand, for those who don't understand that term.
Well, they're rules that keep the machines from going in certain directions. That's a very basic. For example, some of the profane outputs that we've heard from some of these machines suggest that the guardrails weren't in place to keep the machines from using profane language. It's
Yeah.
just a word that they use. But it's also the sequence of logic in the training and the sequence of logic in the development of the algorithms and so forth. And by the way, and I'll come back to this in a second, but an aside here, this is why a number of companies who want to start working on this advanced AI capabilities are not using the commercial models. They're developing their own models. They're taking some underlying technology, taking their own company's data and doing their own programming. It's to not only get results that are more on target, possibly reducing the amount of work the human has to do in this a little bit, but it also makes sure that the guardrails are in place for what a company needs. No company on this planet wants to have a chatbot or an agent of some sort come out with profanity when talking with a customer. That's not a good thing to happen. But we hear that some companies are reducing the guardrails to help in the programming of sorts. Um, Regardless, it is you as the human who have to understand what's happening with these models, which is going to affect, not may, but is going to affect which of the models you use.
Yeah.
Because the models have to be, as you've been saying, Tom, reliable and useful and working with you in a way that generates the results you want. These aren't just toys anymore for people to play with. These are becoming tools that leaders, not just first line people, but leaders use to cut through a lot of work and fulfill their leadership responsibilities, which you and I have defined as strategy and planning and analysis and making sure the work of the organization is happening and assessing results and delivering results and so forth. High level work, all of it high level work. And the machines won't get you there. They'll get you part of the way there. And you choose the one that gets for your particular organization as far as you can do. But then you as the human have to come in and take it over from there. You may even, by the way, after working with some of these models, decide that you have to become one of these organizations building your own model to get the
Yeah.
results you want, to improve the productivity. This is something that uh, the big tech companies may want to start thinking about. I'll put it that way. What is going to be useful for the business customers here? And I think also one responsibility of a leader in the organization is to make sure that all of the work in the organization is aligned with strategy, culture, focus, results. And what this means is that we all know that there are a lot of younger workers, even some middle-aged workers these days, who have these models that are so easy to get and are playing around with them and using them to generate work. Knowing what you are learning about the limitations of these models, you as a leader have to be fully aware of where people in your organization are using these models to do work, because odds are something is going to be happening that is not aligned with all of those things, strategy, culture, results, and therefore is making your company look bad. In our previous video, Tom, we talked about something that you ran into, a customer service issue where it was clear that the leadership of the organization had not themselves sat down and worked through a process with their agent. And the more that these AI companies push not just chatbots, not just models, but AI agents,
Right.
which have more ability to function independently, the more possibility for damage. So the more that you as leader need to know exactly what's going on there, how your people are using it, and how what results they're getting. This suggests, by the way, that you as a leader may want to take a more proactive role in the use of AI in your organization. This
Absolutely.
is where your organization is going. Best to capture what's happening, set standards, set a culture around this, give people the training they need, set up review processes. All AI output needs review processes so that you can make sure that you understand and you are in control of what's happening in your organization when people use the various AI tools. This is another responsibility of a leader that Tom, you and I don't hear about in the business press.
Now, one of the subjects, Deirdre, that you were talking with me about, and we're going to explore this in the video we do next that talks about the what are we seeing in the marketplace? But one of the things we're seeing in the marketplace is really lazy descriptions of this, right? It's really lazy. You and I would call it lazy because meaning they're not getting deep enough into it to really, and this separates out the difference between people who really use it at a high level versus those who don't bring the usability into it, meaning I've used it. I know exactly what these things are doing. Let me just report now based on that. It's clear that most of this stuff, and it really is terrible that the most egregious aspects of this are sometimes coming from incredibly hallowed organizations that publish these things that should know better.
Should know better. But what I think we're seeing in the business press, for example, is a lot of reporting of news, and it's fascinating. I read multiple AI newsletters every day, and it's fascinating to track what's happening and going on. But that's reporting news. It's not relating it
Yeah.
to how leaders work with AI to deliver results in for their organization in the marketplace. We're also not seeing, and this is something else we've talked about, uh, the support that leaders need in the business press
Yeah.
itself about how do you as a leader work with these models. That's what we're trying to fill in with some of these videos. How the work of a leader changes, not only in terms of the substance as we've been defining it, how you go about your daily work, but it's also how your responsibilities change in relation
Yeah,
to the use of AI throughout the organization.
absolutely. No, you're exactly right. Deirdre, this is a really interesting problem. We should make one caveat here, or caveat. We are evaluating this from the broadest perspective. There are plenty of alternate media people that I see that understand this very well and have incredibly great blogs on this and Twitter posts and videos and all this. We know that. That's how we learned it, right? We didn't learn it.
Right.
We're talking about the Harvard Business Review, Fortune, MIT Review, all these. Now, MIT Review can be hot and cold, but just we'll keep going. Well, we won't evaluate, but just we're talking about how do people generally get this? Because not soon we're going to have to talk about we have to ignore that because we're finding the actual broad-based viewability of these things is starting to become minuscule compared to alternate media. So we're focusing our conversation on that. What are most people seeing here that just becomes really, and it becomes a really stark difference, mostly because you are an expert and you're looking at this, seeing it. But you're both most of your consumption of this is at what you and I would call the mainstream media, and my focus is on the alternate media. Where it can become it's clear for you because you're an expert already. But if you weren't, you might believe those are the real key issues. And it's AGI,
Right,
I don't know how many times a day I think about AGI. It's kind of like zero.
right.
Now, how do I think about it? I think about it from a safety point of view. Is the model going to get out of control? Have they, in your way of saying it just a minute ago, are they starting to remove too many of the guardrails? And do I like that model? Or do I think that model should be used for general purpose things? Right? You and I see it a different way. It's like the management, like I've said before, the management of water, the management of fire. You can see where it's well done, where it's not well done. Then you decide where are you going to place yourself, right? It's the our student entrepreneur who said, I just decide where am I going to land myself in here. I would say one more thing, Deirdre, the transitioning our discussion to the substance of work. And let me give you the example, and then you can take it from there. So I had an entrepreneur, a very successful entrepreneur, business builder, big things, and does them in all different kinds of things. So he's done them in tech and he does it at the same time in real estate development and all this. Comes to me and says, would you help me because I have a university that's come to me for a graduate program. They want to do a summer capstone project with one of my tech business, and they want to do a positioning um, evaluation and recommendation. Would you help me with this? And I said, sure, I'd be glad to. And I said, I'd even be willing to take the lead on it, which, by the way, as I think I told you, they excluded me from that. But the reason what I did was to start it out is I took a weekend and did the piece of work using, at that point, I think I was using, I don't remember what, it was Claude or it was ChatGPT. I don't remember. But I did the work. I did a positioning analysis based on basically a mildly directed model to say, here's the business, here's the name, here's the URLs, and I'd like you to give me a market positioning evaluation of this and a competitive analysis evaluation and all the elements of competitive analysis, all the way down through likes, dislikes in the marketplace, pricing, strategy, product, just you name it. I gave it all the things you and I know. And it gave me an incredible first draft. Now, I know the company, so I looked at it and said, well, it's a naive approach, but yes, it gave us answers. And like you said, you could be seduced into believing it was good. And it was good, but it was good at a naive level. Not somebody that knew the marketplace, knew their position, knew all this would say, well, it's not quite that simple, right? It's more nuanced than that. It's more specific. So the entrepreneur said to me, well, okay, but I have answers to some of this stuff. Why don't we incorporate it? I said, no, no, no. What I think we ought to do is give this to the university and let them take it. And that becomes the starting point. Well, they basically came back and said, no, that's where we thought we were going to end up. Right. And
Yeah.
we were going to collect all this data for you. Well, I did the work for them.
Right.
I mean, and so then they didn't want me to lead it anymore, but it's okay. I don't even know if he continued on with it because they thought that was what their output was going to be. And said, no, I did that over a weekend. That is what we mean. That substance of what that team was supposed to do was figure out what the next step is, right? That when you say it changes the substance of work, well, should it take somebody like me? My buddy could have done it. He could have taken the weekend and given them the basics, and then they have a great starting point. And then what kind of insight can they bring? Can they demonstrate what they've learned in their 2-year program? Can they now demonstrate that? Can they demonstrate the development of their judgment? Can they demonstrate their teamwork in collective judgments and so forth? That's what you and I mean by they were coming to it with an old approach to the work. You and I were coming at it, or I was coming at it as a new approach to the work. What was
Oh,
their answer to me? We don't want you to play.
right. And and a couple of points to make here, Tom. And one is that one of the aspects of knowledge that all leaders might not even think of themselves as having is knowing how business works, knowing business processes, knowing what happens in organizations, knowing flows of work, understanding all of the aspects of things that have to happen for, say, a product to get to market or for you to sell to customers and so forth. None of this knowledge is embedded in the models. Mostly,
Yeah.
I think, because it's not the sort of thing that is prominent in the data that's being scraped. But it's
Mhm.
also that the people who are programming these models, training the models, don't themselves understand the business aspects of them. I think the same is true in the example you're giving, that we may find in academia that sometimes students need to be taught all of the business aspects that they have to address in a project for the results of a project to become useful to an entity. And what it sounded to you, and it sounds like to me, is they thought that the simple output was sufficient for something, whatever, to
Yeah.
happen after that. And it's not. You and I both know that there's this whole bunch of stuff. There's an elegant term for you, bunch of stuff that has to happen between the output of a model and getting something that someone, say, sponsoring this project, your buddy sponsoring this project, could use to further his business.
All
And
right. So to be fair about this, I did load our books into as knowledge, right? So we did know a whole lot about the subject of how do you do a business plan? How do
into
you, right?
your output, not the output the students were going to do.
Right. But the
Okay.
point, though, is that what we were expecting them to do is demonstrate their understanding of that, of those subjects, right? And why they were being included in the terms being used and what the subtleties were. And this changes the substance of what we are all doing. And a year ago, that would not have been possible because of the lack of the capability of the tools. I could not have easily taken a weekend. I could have done it, but it would have been brutal and hard, right?
Yeah, but what you're also touching on here now is something else we've touched on, Tom, that while our videos so far have been mostly on business uses, we both believe strongly that AI is going to be used in education. But then it's a question of what education. If it's simply used as what I'm defining as the machine part, that is, how can you use these models to do a search, to maybe organize your information and maybe submit a written report, that's just a first draft. The education has to fill in the substance
Yeah.
behind this. For the education in the use of these models to be useful, effective, what students need to learn when they're going out and looking for a job in this difficult job marketplace.
And this is why we say that the institutions will come our way. It's just that some of them are not, they're not even thinking this way because essentially, and I know you and I have done this before, right? We've taught for years where we're doing summer capstone.
Right,
So we know what that is in the business term and so forth. But and we were taking it and moving it already, and this was early summer. We were moving it already into the 21st century, into what you and I would call the that next step phase.
right.
Um, and they didn't like that because it didn't fit their model. And our view is no, it has to fit your model. That's how you prove your value, right? Especially in this area
Right,
of business and technology combined.
right.
But the point is that we have a very strong belief that that is changing the substance of the work that I would be doing periodically. I'm going to do my own assessment of my own business, right? And I'm going to take I do it every week actually for you and me.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
I always focus on, okay, where are we? How are we positioned against the marketplace? What can we do to refine how we're approaching this? So it changes the substance of how you function in the marketplace because you have an ability to no longer require people to do it for you. You can do it, and now they can provide a new aspect to it. And that's why you and I say, this is why we're focusing on this right now. It's changing a lot. And we're not just saying it so that it's provocative, right? And creates a hook for people. We're saying it
Yeah.
because we believe it. We can see it.
Well, any of our listeners who have gotten a master's degree in some aspect of business only have to think through the courses they took
Yeah.
while getting their degree and thinking about how these models would even change the substance of those courses. And
Yes.
then once you understand that, how are these models changing marketing? How are these models changing go-to-market, developing go-to-market plans? How are these changing strategy? All of the aspects in there. How are they changing finance, building financial models, and so forth? And then you add up all of the substance changes in the individual courses, and you start to see how the substance across business is changing or is going to have to change going forward as the use of the models happen. And it's not simply introducing the models as tools in the different areas. It's developing the capabilities that may combine areas, that may draw on different areas to do different types of work,
No
that
doubt.
may restructure your organization, change all of your processes, change your workforce, and so forth. And that's the depth to which we think the substance of organizations is going to be changing over the next five years, certainly 10 years, but certainly in 5 years as well.
And we've seen in technology, Deirdre, we've seen where um, some work that's been done in various functions has been the summarization of that work was required because you couldn't get to all the detail, you couldn't manage it. And so you had to find ways of summarizing, which deflated and hid some of the actual causation of an event or a problem, made it even more difficult to see. And as the capability to deal with that detail became um, more able, it changed a little bit in how the person functioned. We see that same thing going on now. So it's the same thing as now, where you don't have to rely on two levels of summarization before you can make sense of the financials. And you can't really drill back to all the detail because it's just too hard to do it and too much compute power, and you're going through three different kinds of systems. Now, with these models, it's like you're dealing with a huge database in a flat file, right? You just, boom, you can get it, you can consolidate it. And then it's a matter of, okay, how do I weight the analysis? How do I deal with all that? That we're seeing that same thing here in a very, I've just given a very, very ugly example, but it's a similar example where now another technology's come in and kind of and pushed a lot of that to just required ability to summarize. But then now I've got this powerful tool to take and make sense of it in a different way. And it change? Does it take a lot of people out of the process? You bet it does. But it also is going to need more people for all the other work that you're now going to be able to do that you haven't been able to do in the past. And that's part of what we are seeing missing in the description. That one of our people that we like to talk about this, Mark Benioff. I was reminded earlier this morning as I was doing another piece of work, and I ran across a statement he made that he can envision 50% of the work that's done at Salesforce to be done through automation using AI models of some form. I think he's probably right. Now, the question then becomes, okay, what everyone comes to the conclusion is that means you're cutting off that 50% of the hiring of people. It may be, but the point is, he's saying 50% of the work. It doesn't mean that remaining 50% is all the work they can do. No, it means maybe you can now push the business further. You can make it more vertical or more horizontal, or you can begin spending more time on this. So you're adding back people, but those people that you're adding back, they do have a different skill than this. And that's what we're talking about, is that you yourself, if you even envision that you might be in that 50%, you can teach yourself this stuff, as opposed to you used to have to go to upskilling classes, right? You don't
Right.
have to do that anymore. This stuff can help teach you if you have good brains that you were working at Salesforce in the first place. You've got capability. It's a matter of developing that ability to get comfortable to use this stuff, and it can help propel you towards that. So there's, and that's what we are trying to make sure that everybody's seeing. Do we know exactly how to do it? Do we know how to think about it? No. We're just trying to make sure people realize that these things are there and they're going to happen, and we all are going to be dealing with them. And we're trying to get people to think about them early so that they can begin making headroads to try to see them fast. So we've gone all over the place here, Deirdre, but we've covered this topic pretty well, we put a blanket over the topic pretty well, but do you want to just kind of summarize for us as we reach the 1 hour mark here and tell us where we came through today?
Well, I think I would encourage all listeners to think that there's a lot of chatter out there in the marketplace, in the news, from tech companies and so forth. And they're saying all sorts of things which may or may not be valid one way or the other. But I think, and this is the substance of how it's not just the substance of the work of a leader that's changing. I was thinking about this as you were just talking. It's the substance of how a human prepares to enter a marketplace. It's a change in the substance of the organization, and it's a change in the whole structure of work itself. How is work going to be done, and so forth. So I think I would encourage all humans to start thinking through how the structure of how they approach the workforce, the workplace, organizations, and so forth is going to change, and how they can position themselves vis-a-vis the machines. What type of human machine partnership can they envision for themselves, and think about building a future for themselves? There's not going to be anyone out there making all of this happen. It's going to happen piecemeal, or more to the point, it's going to be happening when people develop modes of working that are successful and then others copy them. So it's best to be out ahead, to develop your own sense of you as the human vis-a-vis the machines out there. How are you going to take everything that makes you, not only makes you human, but makes you a capable business leader with all of your knowledge and judgment and instincts, and allows you to succeed in this workplace that is developing? I find it a fascinating question. And it's one, we haven't covered this completely, Tom. We're going to come back to this topic. Don't worry.
So, in the sage words of Jim Harbaugh and his father, who has it better than us? Right? We get to do this for a living, Deirdre. And
That's
we're
right.
not only that, we're sitting in, a country that has some of the best food and the best people in the world on the north coast of Spain in the Mediterranean.
Right.
I mean, who has it better than us?
It's perfect for us.
It's always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure, Tom. So long.